We all love the idea of change. We read about it, we talk about it, we even post quotes about it on social media. But if we're being honest, most of us don't really change. We tweak, we adjust, we rearrange the furniture in the same room. But real transformational change, the kind that fundamentally alters the way we live, work, or think, rarely happens until something inside of us snaps. And that snap usually comes in the form of disgust. I'm not talking about mild dissatisfaction. I'm not talking about those moments when you think, yeah, I should probably start exercising, or I should probably eat healthier. That's not disgust, that's casual acknowledgement. And casual acknowledgement is comfortable. You can live with it, you can tolerate it, you can even convince yourself it's not a big deal. But disgust is different. Disgust is when you hit the wall. Disgust is when you look at the situation you're in, whether it's your job, your health, your relationships, or your habits, and you say, enough. I cannot live like this anymore. The reason disgust is so powerful is because it cuts off our excuses. When you're just uncomfortable, you still justify things. It's not that bad. It could be worse. I'll deal with it later. Disgust eliminates those phrases from your vocabulary. When you're disgusted, you don't care if it could be worse. You know it has to be better. You don't tell yourself you'll deal with it later. You decide you'll deal with it now. But here's the challenge. Most of us have an incredible tolerance for discomfort. We adapt to situations that don't serve us simply because they're familiar. We normalize mediocrity. We tell ourselves stories to make the unacceptable acceptable. And as long as we can manage the discomfort, we stay put. We stay in jobs we hate because they pay the bills. We stay in unhealthy routines because they're easy. We stay in toxic relationships because they're predictable. We settle for less not because we don't want more, but because we can survive with less. The human brain is built to seek stability, not necessarily improvement. Stability feels safe, improvement feels risky. So we resist change until stability becomes unbearable. And that's the ironic part. Real change only happens when the pain of staying the same outweighs the fear of the unknown. Until then, we'll find reasons to delay, avoid, or minimize the need for change. Think about it. People don't usually change their diet because they read an article about nutrition. They change it when they get the lab results back and realize their health is in serious danger. People don't leave an unhealthy relationship the first time they see a red flag. They leave when they've seen so many red flags that the thought of staying becomes suffocating. People don't start a new career because they saw an inspiring video. They start when they can't bear the thought of waking up one more Monday doing something that drains the life out of them. We talk a lot about motivation as if it's a gentle nudge, but real motivation often feels like a punch in the gut. It's not polite, it's not comfortable, it's raw. And disgust, true disgust, has a way of stripping away all the polite reasoning we use to avoid change. It pushes you past the point of no return. It forces you to make a decision, not someday, but now. Now, there's a dangerous myth about change that keeps a lot of people stuck, the myth of the right time. We tell ourselves we'll make the change when we've saved enough money, when the kids are older, when work slows down, when life is less chaotic. But here's the truth, life never hands you a perfectly packaged moment for change. There is no ideal window. Waiting for the right time is just a socially acceptable way to procrastinate. The real right time isn't on a calendar, it's in your gut. It's when you wake up one morning and say, I'm done. And it's not the kind of done you post online for likes and sympathy. It's the private, unshakable, non-negotiable decision that something changes today. When you reach that point of disgust, something fascinating happens. Your vision becomes sharper. You see everything differently. You notice the patterns you've been ignoring. You recognize the compromises you've been making. You realize how much energy you've been wasting just trying to tolerate a life you don't actually want. And in that moment, you see with absolute clarity what needs to change. That clarity is one of the most valuable gifts disgust gives you. It's why people make radical changes after a breaking point. They suddenly see the truth without all the sugarcoating. And once you see the truth, you can't unsee it. You can't go back to pretending you didn't know. But here's the part most people overlook. Disgust alone isn't enough. Feeling fed up is just the spark. The real work is taking that spark and turning it into a fire that doesn't burn out in a week. Because here's what happens. You hit that breaking point. You decide you're going to change. You start strong, and then life throws distractions, resistance, and old habits back in your face. And if you don't have a plan, if you don't anchor that emotional surge to concrete action, you risk slipping right back into the situation you swore you'd never tolerate again. So when you reach that point of disgust, don't just say, I'm done. Follow it immediately with, here's what I'm doing next. Be specific. Be intentional. Decide exactly what the first step is. It doesn't have to be dramatic. You don't have to change everything overnight. In fact, you shouldn't, because sustainable change comes from consistent action, not massive overnight overhauls. But you do have to start. And you have to start while the disgust is fresh enough to fuel you through the early resistance. Sometimes that first step is having a brutally honest conversation you've been avoiding. Sometimes it's deleting the phone number you keep going back to. Sometimes it's updating your resume. Sometimes it's setting the alarm for 5 a.m. and going for that run. The action itself is less important than the fact that you take it immediately, because momentum matters. The longer you wait after that moment of disgust, the easier it becomes to rationalize your way back into comfort. The emotions fade, the urgency weakens, and the old stories start to creep back in. It's not that bad. I can deal with this a little longer. Maybe I was overreacting. No. You weren't overreacting, you were finally being honest with yourself. And if you're not careful, you'll lose that honesty and slip back into the cycle. The truth is, disgust can be the greatest turning point of your life, but only if you respect it enough to act on it. It's a signal from deep inside you saying, this is not who you are. This is not where you're meant to be. This is not the life you were built for. That's not a message you ignore. That's a message you answer. And here's the beauty of it. When you do act on that disgust, when you use it as a catalyst, you often look back and realize it was one of the best things that ever happened to you. In the moment, it feels like frustration. It feels like exhaustion. It feels like you're at the end of your rope. But later you see that it was the moment your life started moving towards something better. Nothing changes until you're disgusted, because until then, you're willing to tolerate the gap between where you are and where you could be. But when that tolerance runs out, when you finally decide that good enough is no longer good enough, you open the door to something greater. You stop negotiating with your limitations and start demanding more from yourself in your life. So if you're in that place right now, if you're tired of pretending you're okay with something you're not, don't waste this moment. Don't wait for the mythical right time. You've already been given the signal. The discomfort is no longer manageable. The tolerance is gone. That's your invitation. Take it. Because the truth is, you can't think your way into a new life. You have to act your way into it. And the moment you're truly disgusted is the moment you'll finally have the courage to act without overthinking, without waiting, without asking for permission. Nothing changes until you're disgusted. And once you are, nothing can stay the same. We all have moments when we think about change. It's that quiet voice in your head that says, I should do something different. Maybe you've had it at the end of a long workday, staring at your computer screen, wondering if this is really how you want to spend your life. Maybe you felt it standing in front of the mirror, asking yourself how you got here. Maybe it's crept in on a Sunday night when you realize that tomorrow is going to look exactly like last Monday and the Monday before that and the Monday before that. But here's the thing, those moments usually pass. We tell ourselves we'll think about it later when things settle down, when we're more ready. We let the feeling fade and life goes back to normal. That's because discomfort alone isn't enough to create real change. You can be uncomfortable for years. You can want something different and still never take a step toward it. Real change doesn't happen when things are slightly unpleasant. It happens when you can't take it anymore. There's a line, an invisible one that we all have. On one side of that line, we're uncomfortable, maybe even frustrated, but we're still able to tolerate it. We keep going because we know how to survive here. But on the other side of that line is disgust. And disgust is different. Disgust is when you've crossed the point of tolerating. It's when you feel the weight of staying exactly where you are, and the thought of continuing is unbearable. I've seen people stay in situations for years because it wasn't bad enough to leave. They stayed in jobs they didn't like because the paycheck was steady. They stayed in relationships that were slowly eroding their confidence because they feared being alone. They stayed in unhealthy patterns because those patterns were predictable. It's not that they didn't want more, it's that they could still endure less. The human brain has a strange way of normalizing what we live in every day. We get used to things, even the things that drain us. And as long as we can cope, we convince ourselves there's no urgency to change. But when you hit disgust, that ability to cope disappears. It's no longer about what's manageable, it's about what's intolerable. You don't think, maybe I should change someday. You think, I'm changing now. Disgust is not a gentle motivator. It doesn't whisper in your ear, it shouts. It disrupts your routine. It stops you mid-thought. It shakes you awake and demands that you pay attention. It's the point when the pain of staying the same finally outweighs the fear of doing something different. And here's the reality. Most people don't act until they get there. We like to imagine we'll change for logical reasons, that we'll make improvements because it's the smart thing to do. But human beings rarely work that way. We move when we have to. We grow when the alternative is no longer survivable. The right time to change isn't marked on your calendar. It's marked by the moment you can no longer stand the way things are. The problem is people wait for change to feel comfortable. They wait for it to feel safe. They want to feel confident before they act. But that moment rarely comes, because by definition, change is uncomfortable. And the kind of change that transforms your life is never going to feel safe in the beginning. The only thing powerful enough to push you past the hesitation is disgust, the raw, unfiltered realization that you've had enough. And when that moment comes, something else happens. You see more clearly than you ever have before. You notice the patterns you've been repeating, the compromises you've been making, the excuses you've been telling yourself. You stop minimizing the problem. You stop sugarcoating the truth. The fog lifts, and you see your reality for what it is. That clarity can be brutal, but it's also liberating, because once you see it, you can't go back to pretending you didn't. That's why disgust can be such a powerful gift. It strips away all the comfort and illusion that's been keeping you stuck. It forces you to confront the truth. And in that confrontation, you find the courage to do something different. But there's a catch. Disgust alone doesn't change anything. You can feel fed up, angry, even desperate for something different. But if you don't act on it quickly, the moment will fade. And when it fades, the comfort of old habits will try to pull you back. So the moment you feel it, the moment you're truly done, you have to move. You have to do something tangible. Something that signals to yourself that this is not just another emotional outburst, but the beginning of a real shift. That action doesn't have to be massive. You don't have to rebuild your life overnight. You just have to take one clear, deliberate step in the direction you need to go. It might be as simple as making a phone call. It might be deleting the thing you keep going back to. It might be writing the resignation letter. It might be signing up for the class, booking the appointment, clearing the schedule. What matters is that you do it while the fire is still burning, before the old comfort starts to whisper in your ear again. And here's why acting quickly matters so much, because disgust is a temporary gift, it's intense, but it doesn't last forever. Life has a way of lulling us back into old rhythms. The moment that feels unbearable today can start to feel manageable again if you give it enough time. And once it feels manageable, the urgency disappears. The danger isn't that you won't want change, it's that you'll stop believing you need it now. I've seen it happen too many times. Someone reaches their breaking point. They say, that's it, I'm done. Things are going to be different. They feel alive with the energy of that decision. And then they wait. They think they'll start next week or next month. But life fills in the gap. Work gets busy. Family needs attention. And before they know it, the feeling has faded and they're back where they started, only now with an added layer of disappointment for not following through. That's why disgust has to be followed by direction. You can't just be done with the old. You have to start moving toward the new. That's the only way to turn that breaking point into a turning point. And once you've taken that first step, you have to keep going even when it gets uncomfortable again, because it will. Change doesn't become easy just because you've decided to make it. But the energy that disgust gives you can carry you through the hardest early days if you let it. And here's the part people forget. Acting on disgust doesn't just change your situation, it changes you. Every time you refuse to settle for something you've outgrown, you strengthen your belief that you can create something better. Every time you follow through on the moment you say, enough, you reinforce the idea that your life is in your hands. And the more you do it, the less you'll need to hit absolute rock bottom before you make a change. You'll trust yourself enough to act sooner. That's the deeper lesson here. Disgust is often the first real conversation you have with yourself about what you deserve, mind and body agreeing in unison that something about this picture no longer matches who you are or what you want. It's uncomfortable, yes, but it's also a signal of alignment. It's the truth breaking through. So if you felt that lately, if there's an area of your life where you've stopped just being uncomfortable and started feeling truly done, pay attention. That's not a feeling to brush aside. That's an invitation to stop tolerating and start building. An invitation to trade the predictability of the familiar for the possibility of something better. And no, it won't be perfect. You'll stumble. You'll question yourself. You'll have moments when you wonder if it was worth it. But here's what I can tell you. You will never regret leaving behind something that was slowly killing your joy. You will never look back and wish you'd stayed in a place that didn't value you, or a habit that drained you, or a life that didn't fit you. Because nothing changes until you're disgusted. But once you've reached the point where staying the same is no longer an option, everything can change. That moment is the door. And the only question left is whether you're willing to walk through it before it closes. We like to believe that change is a decision, that one day we'll just wake up, decide we want something different, and take the steps to make it happen. It sounds logical, it sounds mature, it even sounds inspiring. But if we're honest, that's not how most change actually works. Most of the time we don't change because we want to, we change because we have to. We change because something inside of us reaches a point where staying the same is no longer possible. We change when we've had enough, when we're so disgusted with the way things are that doing something different feels like the only option left. And I don't mean disgusted in the casual sense. I'm not talking about being annoyed, irritated, or mildly unhappy. I'm talking about a deep, visceral feeling that says, I cannot keep doing this. It's that moment when you're not just tired, you're done. When the situation you're in has crossed a line you didn't even know was there, and you realize that no amount of excuses, justifications, or compromises can make this okay anymore. What's strange is how long it takes us to get there. People can live with frustration for years. They can put up with toxic environments, unhealthy habits, and unfulfilling routines far longer than they ever imagined possible. They stay because they know how to survive there. They've learned to manage the discomfort. And as long as it's survivable, they can tell themselves it's not urgent. That's the dangerous part. Our ability to adapt to less than we deserve. We make peace with it. We normalize it. We convince ourselves that it's just the way things are, or that other people have it worse. We learn to live with it, even when it's slowly eroding our energy, our confidence, and our joy. But disgust is different. Disgust doesn't let you normalize anything. It doesn't let you adjust your standards lower and lower until you forget where they started. Disgust shows up like an uninvited guest, flips the lights on, and exposes every crack, every flaw, every compromise you've been trying not to see. It's the feeling that tells you with complete clarity, this cannot continue. And here's the thing about disgust. It's not subtle, it's not polite. It's not something you can ignore once it hits. You might try for a little while, but the discomfort keeps getting louder. The gap between what you're tolerating and what you actually want becomes impossible to unsee. And at some point, you either make a change or you break. That's why disgust is so powerful. It removes the illusion of choice. As long as you believe you can stay, you probably will. But when disgust sets in, staying no longer feels like an option. It's no longer about wanting change, it's about needing it. I've seen this happen in people's careers. They go to a job they hate day after day, year after year. They complain about it, they fantasize about leaving, but they don't. Then one day something happens. Maybe it's one meeting too many, one insult too far, or one more Monday morning of dread that finally tips the balance. And suddenly it's over. They start updating their resume that night. They start making phone calls. They start taking action they've been avoiding for years, not because they learned something new, but because they felt something different. It happens in health too. People will ignore the warning signs for years. They'll skip the gym, eat poorly, avoid the doctor. They'll tell themselves they'll change soon. And then they get that diagnosis, or they see a photo of themselves they can't ignore. Or they find themselves out of breath walking up a flight of stairs and the disgust hits. The switch flips. It's no longer a vague intention, it's an immediate priority. It even happens in our relationships. You can overlook small hurts and disappointments for a long time. You can keep hoping things will get better. But then there's a moment, a comment, a betrayal, a silence. That's one too many. And when that happens, you're done in a way that's impossible to reverse. And yet, as powerful as disgust can be, it's only the starting point. It's the ignition, not the engine. The danger is that we confuse the feeling with the change itself. We think that because we've made the decision in our minds, the hard part is over. But the truth is, the feeling will fade. And if you don't act before it does, you risk going right back to where you were. That's why the moments when you feel disgusted are sacred. They're the rare times when you see your life without the filter of comfort or denial. You have absolute clarity about what needs to change. You have raw energy that's powerful enough to push you past fear, but that window doesn't stay open forever. Life will try to pull you back into the familiar. Your old habits will try to reassert themselves. And if you wait too long, you'll start to believe the lies again. It's not so bad. I can deal with this. Maybe I was overreacting. No. You weren't overreacting. You were telling yourself the truth. And the only way to hold on to that truth is to turn it into action immediately, not someday, not next week, today. It doesn't have to be dramatic. You don't need to burn bridges or overhaul your entire life in one move. But you do need to take a step that locks in your decision, a step that makes it harder to go back, a step that says, I'm serious about this. Maybe that's signing the papers. Maybe that's making the phone call. Maybe that's throwing something away. Whatever it is, it needs to happen while your disgust is still fresh enough to fuel you. Because once you've taken that first step, the momentum starts to build, and momentum is everything in change. It's the difference between a powerful idea and a lasting transformation. The feeling of disgust may fade, but if you've already set something in motion, the process keeps moving forward. Over time, you'll start to notice something else. The more you honor those moments of disgust by acting on them, the less you'll need to hit rock bottom before you change. You'll start to trust yourself more. You'll notice the warning signs earlier. You'll become less willing to settle for less than you deserve, not because you're impatient, but because you've proven to yourself that you can handle the discomfort of change. And that's the ultimate gift of disgust. It's not just about fixing one problem. It's about raising your standards permanently. It's about teaching yourself that you don't have to tolerate what's breaking you down. It's about realizing that the discomfort of growth is far better than the comfort of staying stuck. So if you're in that place right now, if there's an area of your life that's gone past frustration and into disgust, don't waste it. Don't try to quiet it down. Don't tell yourself it's not that bad. It is that bad. That's why you feel this way. This is your signal. This is the moment you've been waiting for, even if you didn't know you were waiting for it. And yes, it will be hard. Change always is. You'll face uncertainty. You'll face resistance. You'll face the voice in your head that tells you it would be easier to just go back. But here's the thing, you already know what back looks like. You've lived it, you've decided you don't want it anymore. So the only real option is forward. Nothing changes until you're disgusted. And once you are, you have to make a choice, let the feeling fade and stay where you are, or turn it into the moment your life took a different path. You may not be able to control when disgust shows up, but you can control what you do with it. You can use it as a reason to act, a reason to risk, a reason to finally stop settling. You can take the step you've been avoiding. You can rewrite the story you've been living. Because disgust is not just the end of what you've been tolerating, it's the beginning of something new. And if you honor it, if you act on it, if you let it push you past your fear, it can be the most valuable turning point of your life. There's a moment in every person's life when something clicks. It's not a slow realization. It's not an idea you warm up to. It's a sudden, sharp recognition that the way things are cannot stay the way they are. It's the moment you stop talking about change and start needing it. It's when the conversation in your head shifts from I should to I must. That moment almost never comes from comfort. It rarely comes from a place of calm reflection. It comes when you've been pushed to your edge, when the weight of staying the same is heavier than the fear of doing something different. It comes when you're disgusted. Now, disgusted is a strong word, but that's the point. It's not mild dissatisfaction. It's not that polite frustration you can still live with. Disgust is deeper. It's visceral. It's in your gut. It's the moment you can't sugarcoat your situation anymore. You can't tell yourself, it's not so bad. You can't justify your choices with, it could be worse. Disgust strips away the excuses you've been leaning on for far too long. The strange thing about human beings is how much we can tolerate before we get there. We can live in environments that drain us, routines that numb us, and relationships that chip away at us. And we'll still say, I'm fine. We'll adapt to almost anything, even the things that hurt us simply because they're familiar. We know how to survive here, so we convince ourselves we can keep doing it. We wait. We wait for the right time, for the perfect moment, for the conditions to line up in our favor. We imagine there's going to be a day when change will feel easy, when we'll have the courage, the resources, and the clarity all at once. But that day rarely comes. Instead, what comes as a breaking point, that's when disgust steps in. Disgust is the interruption. It's the thing that stops you mid-routine and forces you to see your life without filters. You suddenly recognize the compromises you've been making. You see the gap between who you are and who you want to be. And you realize that every day you stay the same as a day, you're actively choosing less than what you're capable of. That recognition hurts. It's supposed to, because discomfort alone isn't enough to move most people. We can endure discomfort for years. But disgust is different. It doesn't ask for your attention. It demands it. It's not a gentle nudge, it's a shove. And once it's there, you can't pretend you don't feel it. I've seen this moment play out in people's careers. Someone spends years at a job they don't love, but it pays the bills. They tell themselves they'll leave when they find something better. And then one day, something happens, a meeting, a conversation, an assignment, and it's the last straw. It's not that the event is so much worse than everything else. It's that it's the moment they can't take it anymore. They go home that night and start making plans they've been thinking about for years. It happens in health. People know they need to take better care of themselves. They talk about it. They say they'll start after the holidays or when things slow down or when they feel more motivated. And then there's a moment, a doctor's appointment, a number on a scale, a glance in the mirror, and something changes. They can't unsee it. They can't go back to pretending they have time. It happens in relationships. You can tolerate the little hurts for a long time. You can give second chances, third chances, endless chances. But then there's one conversation, one action, one silence that feels like the end of the road. And from that point on, you're done. But here's the part people misunderstand. Disgust is not the change. It's the invitation to change. It's the door opening, not the walk through it. You can feel disgusted and still do nothing. You can reach your breaking point and still choose to stay exactly where you are. The feeling itself doesn't transform your life, your actions do. And that's where most people get stuck. They mistake the surge of energy that comes with disgust for progress. They feel empowered in the moment, convinced they'll never go back. But feelings fade. The fire that burns hot in that moment can cool quickly if it's not fed with action. That's why the moment you feel it, you have to do something tangible. You have to anchor that emotional energy to a real decision, a real step, something that signals to yourself that this isn't just another frustrated thought. It's the start of something new. That action doesn't have to be dramatic. It doesn't have to be perfect. But it does have to happen quickly, because disgust is a temporary clarity. It gives you the rare ability to see your life without excuses, but life will try to hand those excuses back to you. And if you wait too long, you might take them. The longer you wait, the more you'll hear those familiar whispers. Maybe it's not that bad. Maybe I can hang on a little longer. Maybe I overreacted. No, you didn't overact. You finally told yourself the truth. And that truth is a gift, but only if you use it before it fades. The first step is often the smallest one. Maybe it's making the phone call. Maybe it's clearing the schedule. Maybe it's sending the email, deleting the number, packing the bag. Small steps taken in the heat of disgust create momentum. And momentum matters more than motivation, because motivation comes and goes, but momentum builds on itself. Once you take that first step, you're no longer just feeling the need for change, you're living it. And the more steps you take, the more you reinforce the belief that you can do this. That belief is what carries you when the initial fire dies down, when the resistance shows up, when the fear creeps back in. Over time, something else happens. The more you honor those moments of disgust, the less you need them. You start to act before things get that bad. You become less willing to tolerate what doesn't serve you, not because you've become impatient, but because you've proven to yourself that you can handle the unknown. That's how standards shift. That's how people grow. Not by making one grand decision, but by repeatedly refusing to settle. By turning breaking points into turning points. By treating disgust not as a miserable place to be, but as the clearest signal you'll ever get. So if you're feeling that right now, if there's something in your life you can no longer stomach, something you can't justify anymore, listen to it. That's not a weakness. That's not negativity. That's the part of you that refuses to waste any more time. And yes, it's going to be hard. Change always asks you to give up the comfort of the familiar for the risk of the unknown. You will second guess yourself. You will face setbacks. You will have moments where you think about going back. But the truth is, you already know what going back looks like. You've lived it. You've decided you don't want it. And once you know that, there's really only one direction left to go forward. Nothing changes until you're disgusted. But once you have a choice, treat it like a passing mood or treat it like the starting line. And if you choose the starting line, you may just look back one day and realize that what felt like the worst moment in your life was actually the moment everything started to get better. Because disgust, when you act on it, isn't the end. It's the beginning. There comes a point in life where you stop pretending. You stop dressing up the truth in softer words. You stop explaining away what you know deep down. It's the moment when you're done sugarcoating your reality because you can't stand the taste of it anymore. That's the moment when change becomes possible. Not when things are uncomfortable, but when they're unbearable. Not when they're inconvenient, but when they're intolerable. We don't like to talk about that moment because it's not glamorous. It's not the highlight reel you see on social media. It's messy. It's raw. It's the kind of moment where you look in the mirror or at your calendar or at your bank account or at the state of your health and you feel something you can't push away anymore. It's not just frustration, it's disgust. And disgust is the birthplace of decisive action. The problem is most of us are incredibly skilled at living with good enough. We can survive for years in situations that drain us because they're familiar. We can tolerate dissatisfaction if it's wrapped in stability. We can convince ourselves that the slow ache of settling is better than the sharp sting of change. So we stay. We tell ourselves stories to make it bearable. At least I have a job. At least I'm not alone. At least it's not as bad as it could be. But least is the enemy of growth. The truth is change almost never happens when you're simply uncomfortable. Discomfort is negotiable. You can bargain with it, reason with it, even get used to it. Disgust, though, that's different. Disgust has no negotiation. It's the moment when your spirit refuses to make another deal with mediocrity. It's the day you stop settling for at least and start asking what else is possible. Think about the people who've made the biggest shifts in their lives. Rarely did they do it from a place of mild irritation. They did it because something snapped. A business owner doesn't overhaul their strategy because they had a slightly slow month. They do it when the numbers threaten their survival. A person doesn't get serious about their health because they feel a little sluggish. They do it when the doctor looks them in the eye and says, if you keep this up, You won't be here in 10 years. A leader doesn't change their toxic culture because one person complained. They do it when turnover, burnout, and disengagement become impossible to ignore. The breaking point feels like a collapse, but it's actually the start of rebuilding. That's the paradox of disgust. It feels destructive in the moment, but it's constructive in the long run. It's the emotional earthquake that shakes loose everything you've been clinging to so you can finally see what's underneath. The danger is mistaking that moment for transformation itself. Feeling disgusted is not the change, it's the catalyst. It's the spark, not the fire. Too many people have felt that surge of never again, only to watch it fade because they didn't act while it was fresh. Disgust is a gift, but it's a time-sensitive one. If you let it pass, you'll start stitching the old excuses back together. You'll say, maybe I overreacted, or maybe it's not so bad. You put the mask back on. That's why the most important thing you can do in the moment of disgust is move. Not think, not plan endlessly. Move. Do something that breaks the pattern. Send the resignation letter, make the appointment. Tell the truth, buy the ticket, end the contract, sign up for the program. Take a step while your conviction is hot. Because that's when you have the clarity and courage to do what you've been avoiding. And it doesn't have to be perfect. Perfection is the language of procrastination. You don't need to see the whole staircase, you just need to take the first step. The goal is not to have every detail figured out, but to disrupt the inertia that's been keeping you stuck. Because once you move, you've changed the game. You've proven to yourself that this isn't just a feeling, it's a turning point. Here's what most people miss: disgust isn't just about what you don't want. It's also about what you believe you deserve. You can only be disgusted by something when you know you're meant for more. That's why some people will live with the exact same situation you can't stand. They've convinced themselves it's all they can get. But when you've tasted better, when you've glimpsed your potential, when you felt even for a moment what it's like to be alive in your work, your relationships, your health, you can't go back to pretending you don't know the difference. In that way, disgust is actually hope in disguise. It's the voice that says, this isn't you. It's the part of you that refuses to believe this is the best you can do. It's uncomfortable, yes, but it's also deeply empowering, because if you can't stand where you are, it means you've already outgrown it. But here's the catch: growth means leaving something behind. It means walking away from the comfort of the familiar and into the uncertainty of the unknown. That's where most people hesitate. The fear of what's next feels bigger than the pain of what's now. But if you've reached disgust, you already know the cost of staying. The question is, are you willing to pay it for another month, another year, another decade? The most liberating changes I've ever seen didn't start with a brilliant plan. They started with a line in the sand. A moment when someone said, I will not tolerate this anymore, and meant it. That commitment created the clarity they'd been waiting for. Suddenly, decisions became easier. The path didn't get less scary, but it became non-negotiable. If you're in that place right now, don't run from it. Sit with it for a moment. Let yourself feel the full weight of your disgust. Don't dilute it with distractions or cover it with false positivity. The discomfort you feel is the truth knocking. And if you answer, your life will not be the same, because nothing changes until you're disgusted. But once you are, you're already halfway to a new life. The rest is simply proving to yourself, one small imperfect, courageous step at a time, that you were right to want more. And when you look back, you'll realize that the moment you thought was the lowest point, the moment when you were most fed up, most tired, most unwilling to keep going as things were, was actually the moment you began to rise. That's the gift of disgust. It feels like the end, but it's actually the beginning.